Okay, we're recording now. So, anyone watching, my name is Dallas. Everyone knows me. This is my grandfather, Marshall. Can you state your full name for us?
Marshall Gene Evans.
From?
Honey Falls, New York is where I was born
Okay.
and spent my best years of my life.
All right. So, what I really wanted to start off with, and so where all this kind of comes from, and I don't know if you remember this. I know we were headed somewhere. I know we were going to a hockey game, or we're traveling, and it was me, my mom and dad, you and Nana, and maybe Chloe and Dexter or Dexter or somebody. And I remember, I think my phone died. I think my phone, it died, and I didn't have anything to do. So I was kind of like, shit, like, I'm kind of bored. So I remember I turned around and I asked Nana, like, hey, what was your family like? And she starts telling me all this stuff. And I don't know if it's just being a kid. You kind of assume that you just kind of know everything, but there's all this history that you've never heard before. And it doesn't even have to be crazy stuff, but just, where are you from? Who are your grandparents? Stuff like that. So I remember that day, like, kind of being blown away. And me and Nana talked for a couple hours on the car ride or something. And I don't know, I'm the type of person that's kind of into that type of stuff. I enjoy it at least. But I really liked it, and ever since then, I've always wanted to do more of that. But it's like, you never have time. You don't. You never have nobody. Everyone's schedule doesn't line up. That type shit. So
It's funny because you you are going to be what your elders have become generally.
yeah,
You know,
and so it's good to know where you
good
came
or
from.
bad.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Hopefully, good. So with you, I wanted to start off, and I wanted to say, um, I want to ask you to go as far back as you can, and ask you what were your grandparents like, and on like either side. Did you know them? Did you not know them? Were they old? So, what do you remember of your grandparents on either side?
Okay, we'll start with my father's side. Um, I was born in 1946. My father's father, Jesse Evans, the
I love that
original
name.
Jesse Evans, uh, came from Wales. The parents sent him over at age 7 or 8 to stay with some relatives in Ionia, New York, which
Mm.
is a suburb of Rochester, New York, down in the Finger Lakes area. So he grew up there, and the parents never were able to afford to come over. So he never got to see his parents again. Or I don't know. I think he had a brother came with him. Yeah, he did.
So that was your
Jack,
dad.
I think his name was Jack. I think
Was that your dad's
that was
dad?
my dad's father.
So did he never see his parents ever again?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Did you ever see him or meet him?
No, he died the year I was born. He would actually died before I was born. Died in the same year. I was born in December,
Mm-hmm.
so he died before I was born. I
Mm.
only have a couple pictures of him. Got the big giant mustache, typical,
Yeah.
typical early 1900s.
So what about his wife?
His wife's name was Elizabeth. We always called her Libby. I do recall her. She died probably when I will guess 8 or 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're that young, you really don't. Oh, we're gonna go up see Libby today. And you play outside. You don't pay any attention to
Yeah.
who they are. They're kind of your grandmother on your dad's side, but we never really, because we were living within a couple miles, you never see them that much. Everything's taken for granted.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike my mother's side, where they had a scheduled Sunday dinner. My grandparents, like every Sunday almost.
So what were their names? Your mother's side.
Uh, my mother's maiden name was Hart, Hart. I shouldn't say that because they're password crap. But they were born and brought up uh, south of Rochester, New York, in the Finger Lakes area. Livonia, New York is one of the small towns around. I think Canisius Lake was a lake, I think. But they moved into the city of Rochester, and they owned like a restaurant, almost like a train car, cable car restaurant that was off the tracks.
Really?
One of those old
Like
type,
a diner type
yeah,
thing?
like a diner thing.
That's cool.
And
What about what year was that?
oh God, that was. I have no idea. Probably 30s, 40s.
Yeah.
By the time it got to be the 50s, they were older. Because I remember going over their house, and I always thought they looked so old, but very friendly, and
Pull that just a hair closer to your mouth.
very, very friendly people. And that okay?
Yep.
So we'd go over there every Sunday. Of course, seemed like we had a lot of boys in the family because all the boys would go outside and play, and the heck with dinner, and
How many?
I don't know, 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So we go out, shoot darts. You know, we'd all bring our BB guns, and of course my grandparents didn't like that, but they would do what we're going to do, you know.
Yeah.
So the parents are inside yakking, and I never could figure out why do we have to go over there every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And the days that we did not go, the Sundays we did not go, I'm thinking, man, I'm free. I go outside and play ball with my friends, and
What did
but now I look back and I kind of like
glad you did it or something?
I don't know.
So real quick, so you were born in 47,
46.
46. And so how old are you then when you're going over there? 8, 9, 10 years old?
Yeah, 8,
So
9,
it's
10.
Sometime in the 50s, mid 50s.
Yeah.
Paint us a picture of what like the Sunday dinner looks like. You know, what's being served. Like just as much
It
as you
seemed
can
like it was a
recall.
large dinner with your typical roast in the middle and everything, and I don't actually recall sitting down to dinner. Probably because they just let us kids play.
Mm-hmm.
They just wanted us out from under their feet.
Was it like suburbs area? The house?
Yeah, yeah.
That's cool. Okay, so then now on to your parents. So your parents' names are
My dad was Kenneth. My mother's name was Mabel.
Mabel. And
Well, I got to tell you one more thing. Going back to my mother's
yeah.
grandparents. When we go to the grandparents for dinner, my grandmother's mother was always there. They took care of her.
Mm-hmm.
And what's her name? Just escaped me. Anyways, I'll come back to her name in a minute. But she would always wear a tinted visor, kind of like the visor you would see in
Like
a
a-
Las Vegas gambling hall back in
Like
the
a poker
50s.
game?
Yeah, typical. My brothers and I would always joke about what time the poker game start and all that. And she never got it. She's like, and but she had a letter. Somebody before her wrote a letter and had an image of a castle in England called Hever Castle.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Anne Boleyn's birthplace. One of the Henry VIII's wives that he had her head cut off. And but I always remember that letter, looking at it, and it was a big, long image of the castle. The castle was as long as the page was turned sideways.
Like an 8 by 10
Yeah.
or 8 by
A
11?
little story about our relatives owned the castle until 1903 or something. They had to sell it for taxes, or
Mhm.
I don't know. So that was kind of the rumor or
Typical.
the story. And back then, you didn't have the internet. You didn't have a lot of, like, being a kid, you could care less,
Mm-hmm.
As I got older, I got kind of fascinated with it. And my wife and I took a trip before that, I would always have a dream, ever since I was a kid. I would dream I would walk through the drawbridge of the castle,
Mm-hmm.
not even knowing where it was or what it really looked like. And I would walk through the drawbridge, and I'd turn around to look at the wall behind me, thinking it's going to look just like that image that my great-grandmother had.
Yeah.
Big, long walls you could see forever, left to right. So when we went over to England, probably in the mid-'80s, we walked through the castle. I walked through the drawbridge first, and I turned around, looked at the wall. I saw nothing. It's like a country house with a moat.
What? How do you spell it?
Hever. So we spent the day there, and I'm thinking, boy, I hope there's some vibes here, like I'm going to walk by an old bed or a window or an
Like-
arrow slit. That's it, upper right?
That's it right there.
The upper right, yeah. and it's kind of nice because it's a typical. It's got the cross slits in the wall where you stick your bow out for defensive, you know.
Wow.
And when you go inside, those openings are like real deep and they're tapered.
Hmm.
It's like a 45-degree angle, bevel all around the
And
inside.
that's those crosses on there.
Yes, yes. So if you're inside and somebody's attacking you, if that's just a narrow slot, you don't have much range left to right. But being chamfered on the inside all the way around drastically.
So what you're
Ye-
saying is like that on the outside it looks like a tiny little cross, but on the inside it's going,
Exactly.
it's veering way back so someone can move.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
So you have, it's like aiming a barrel of a gun left or right. You can move around with your bow, you know.
Uh huh.
So it's kind of clever. I mean, really simplistic, but
What was it like? Did it feel right? You know, because you say supposedly was it your mother's mother?
yeah, my great grandmother had the story about being in the family. Now,
Yeah.
whether it was true or not,
Who knows? But you did go there. And what year did you go there?
oh, mid 80s. It's funny because I remember that we went there the year that the popular movie was Throw Mama from the Train. Because my wife and I got out of the train to go to the place, and her dress got caught in the door of the train, and she fell out of the train onto the concrete landing area, skinned her knee up. She made it all right, but had a little blood on the dress. So I always remember Throw Mama from the Train movie was the year we went there. So as you get older like me, you don't remember a lot of dates, but you remember things that stick in your head that will, like you could say, well, I don't remember what happened, but I remember when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor or something. So it fixes you in a time period.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
forever.
on this castle, that's like the above view of it, and that's pretty cool. All like the water around it and everything.
Yep.
Where is that?
That is in Kent, which is, if you look on a map of England, it's halfway between Kent and the White Cliffs of Dover. And I think it dated back to, the original builder dated back to like the 1100s or something. It was a really old thing that had been updated a little bit. It's in the town of Edenbridge.
Edenbridge.
Edin Bridge, Edenbridge. Speaking of Edenbridge, we've got on the train in London to go down. Well, we're on our trip to London. It was an art trip. I'll have to tell you about that later, but
So
Right.
it's like south of London.
Yeah.
Does that look correct?
probably 40 miles.
Very cool.
Yeah. And we were in Victoria Station in London getting ready to train because I wanted to say, my wife says the year before, oh, guess where we're going next year on vacation? We're going to London and Paris. I said, whoa. Who's got the money for that? So, well, hear me out. And it was a Keene State College art professor that took people on art appreciation trips every other year, and they get minimum 15 people. And if they get 15 or more, they can go free
Mm-hmm.
through EF Tours, which is educational.
I think that's who I went through.
Yeah.
That's funny.
But anyways, I said, well, what's that all about? I'm not, that's too much money, blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, hear me out. So we ended up going for 2 weeks. It was a round trip jet. They picked us up at the house, a little minivan. We drove to Boston from New Hampshire, where we lived at the time. And it included a round trip jet, included pickup and delivery back to your home. 1 week in London, 1 week in Paris. The hotels are paid for. All meals except lunch was included. All your transfers. We had some transfers for subway or metro or the tube, but anyways, it got all said and done. We went for 2 weeks. All that was paid for, and it was like $2,300 for
Not-
2 weeks.
Not
for
bad.
2 of us, and the hotels are nice.
I think ours was like $5,000 a person, or
Yep.
5,500. No,
A person,
a person, and I think a lot of our meals we had to pay for.
really, yeah. But you want me to go on a little bit on that? Keep going on that or no?
Yeah.
Um, it, wa- it was funny because we knew that the circuitry over there for electronics was going to be all different. So we bought this adapter at Walmart. So first thing we did, we got into the hotel. It was nighttime, and my wife took a shower, washed her hair. She brought her own hair dryer, and back then we weren't didn't know that all the hotels had their own hair dryers. Of course, when they have their own hair dryer, they plugged into their own special wall socket, which we don't have over here,
Mm.
like 220 or whatever,
Yeah.
like an 18 prong plug, you know. And so I thought it was cool. So she got ready to do her hair, and I plugged our adapter into their wall, and like that, and a big flame and black smoke blew out of the plug in the wall. And I think, oh my God, what did I do? So I quick wiped it off with a washcloth, got all the black soot out of there, and I called down to the desk. This is in London, first night in London. And I said, hey, something's going wrong on the second floor. Yeah, the power just went on the second floor. Well, everybody will be okay. We'll track it down. And I was the cause. So about 2 seconds after that, I looked down. I see the hair dryer from the room, their own hair dryer, with the own plug. So
Oh man.
I almost burned the hotel down first night. The Evanses were in London.
So
So,
so your parents, okay?
but let me just end the Hever Castle story.
Yeah.
We were in the Victoria Station, get ready to go down the Hever Castle, and my guide said that if you're going to do that for the day, that's fine. When you go to the train station, just make sure you ask for a ticket to Edenbridge. I said, okay, so I got up to the window, and I said, I want 2 tickets for Edenbridge. Okay, so he was about ready to give me tickets for Edinburgh, Scotland. Because you know they talk funny over there. They don't
Yeah.
talk clear like we do. And the guy behind me, evidently, I can't remember, he must have talked with us to know that we were going to Edenbridge for some reason. So he butts in and he said to the ticket master, no, they're not going to Edinburgh, we're going to Edenbridge. The guy's, oh, good, that's about 12 hours the wrong direction. So, anyways, we got down there, and then we got all done. I'm trying to, when we went through the castle, I kept waiting for vibes or something like, oh, I feel a contact with this place, you know.
Yeah.
And I was so discouraged that I kept waiting for a sign, you know, no sign, and a twitch of a muscle or something hit me in the head or a pot falling off the shelf or nothing happened. So we got all done. We got the cab back to the train station in the little town of Edenbridge, probably 2 or 3 miles away. And the sign on the door, tiny little depot, said next train like hour and a half or something. So we had to wait outside. So my wife had to go to the bathroom. So there's a graphics shop right next door. So I knocked on the door and went in, and I said, I hate to ask you this, but can you think my wife go to the bathroom because the train station's closed?
What's a graphics shop?
Like a print shop,
Okay.
when you want to go and have copies made. This is kind of an England version of Staples, but it was like a private little shop. 2 or 3 ladies sitting in there. So when I walked in and said that, she said, oh yeah, tell her to go through there and right in there, blah, blah, blah. She says, so where in the States are you from? So I said, well, how do you know that? She said, well, you talk funny. I said, no, you talk funny. And they all laugh, you know that. So I said, yeah, we're here. I want to go through Hever Castle. Well, how come you're coming all the way from the States to go to Hever Castle? There must be a reason. So I told her the story about my great-grandmother, like I just told you about. And she said, butted in right then, she said, did you walk through the drawbridge and turn around and look at the wall? And I've had that dream since I was like 7 or 8 years old of doing that. Now, how does she know to ask me if I walk through the drawbridge and turn around and look at the wall? Of course, I'm looking at the wall to see, I don't know what, but I knew it was like, as far as you could see left or right, there'd be a wall there, and it's just a stubby little ivy-colored wall. So I told her about my dream. She says, well, you know, we all still do that over here. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, well, I go in and do that occasionally. Of course, that castle is now part of the National Trust, which is a protected tourist thing. So she says, I go in a lot of times, and a few times I've seen Anne Boleyn's ghost on the wall. So I go through the drawbridge, turn around, look at the wall, and I see Anne Boleyn's ghost go whipping left or right or whatever. And I see it so much that I have my girlfriends go with me, and they never see it. And I'm trying to prove to them that I'm not
Crazy.
crazy. So I said, wow. Like, see, all these, so maybe that was my sign
Yeah.
that I did not get in the castle. I got into a print shop or a copy shop.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Strange.
I like that.
But that was a great day. I love that day. I'll never forget arriving there with a taxi up on top of the knob, and you look down the walkway, and there's the British flag blowing in the wind. Beautiful flag.
Mm-hmm.
And right before you go there, as you start walking down on the right, is a church called St. Peter Church at Haver. That's where all the Boleyn family is entombed in these bronze crypts in the floor, and
Wow.
really
go there too?
Yeah.
That's cool.
So we walked in there. Nobody there. Nobody to
Is
help
it a
us.
small little town?
Edenbridge.
Yeah. Or is it decent size?
I think it was a small town, medium small. But
So
but anyway, that kind of ended that trip in England, and you ought to go on to something else because I'm getting.
yeah, that's fine. So we'll get to more of your travels in a little bit, but just so we talked about your grandparents and what kind of life was like and how you knew them and stuff. And now I just want to hear some about your parents names, where they're from. Well, you said where their parents are from, but it's kind of how they were, what they were like, and then after you describe your parents, talk about a little bit about your brothers too.
Well,
Kind of like your parents, like their personalities, like what were they like?
my dad was, well, back in then, everything's kind of quiet. I don't think parents talk to the children much about
Well,
whatever, It was just kind of like you were a kid and they were a parent, and there was a dividing wall there. Unless you really messed up or, emotions, I don't think. We never hugged or kissed. I remember one time my mother says that I love you. And I was probably 13 or 14 when I heard that. Maybe she's been wanting all of her life to say that. I don't know.
yeah.
Back then, he just never said. But I got a good story about my dad. My dad and I always got along really well. My two older brothers, they were 10 and 12 years older. They grew up when he was very strict. By the time I came along, I think they wore him down. He was very mellow and do anything for you and blah, blah, blah. And, of course, they were 40 when I was born. So by the time I was like 12, they were like 52-ish, 53-ish.
Oh wow.
So they mellowed out by then. So one story about my dad was I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and a bunch of his kids had this bow and arrow, and we took the suction cups off naturally, is what you're supposed to do. And we had a cardboard box in a neighbor's house front lawn. We're go running around, hooting and holler like cowboys and Indians, shooting the arrows in the box. And of course, my arrow ricochets off the box, breaks their window of their house. I was scared to death, and I ran home and ran up in the bedroom. My bedroom window faced their house, so I laid there, my head down the foot of the bed, looking at that house. And my mother comes up. She says, "You all right?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm sick. I don't feel good." And of course, I was never sick, so she knew something was up. So she disappeared, and she came back up a while later. "You all right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm all right." And leave me alone. Blah blah blah. So I see my dad drive up from work or something, and next thing I hear is his footstep pounding up the stairway. Oh man, I've had it now. He said, "What's wrong? Your mother said you don't feel good." And I said, "Well, You know what happened? And I told him about the bow and arrow and all that stuff. He said, come on, we're going up there and talk to old man, whatever his name was. And because as I recall, the people's window I broke, they weren't that friendly.
Yeah.
But anyways, we walked up there, and he walked up, knocked on the door, and I'm standing behind him. And so he said, come on, we're going on the hardware, buy some glass. So I went to buy some glass. We put the window in. Well, he put it in. I watched, and nothing's ever said.
Was it a single pane?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing's ever said, and I didn't know it, but I looked back at it, and it was kind of like a lesson in life.
Mm-hmm.
Again, we didn't talk like, that's your lesson. You should always,
Yeah.
mend your fences and apologize. None of that stuff, as I recall.
But it was action.
It was action, and it was like, you have a responsibility for this. Come on, like, tag behind me, and I'll apologize for you. It's kind of like, he didn't say that, but, and stories like that, and of course I loved baseball. That was my dream, it still is. I wish I could still play. Even at my age, I'd love to try out for a pro team, but it's just a fantasy I've got. But my dad would say every once in a while, come on, we'll go out and play some catch, and you see the movie Field of Dreams. Hey, Dad, you want to play catch? You got to initiate to your 53 or 4-year-old father to go out and play catch. You're going to bounce the ball off his legs, and
Yeah.
because at that point I was a pitcher, and I really could hum the ball. I had a big curveball, blah blah blah. So it's always seemed to be hitting on the dirt in front of me. Either hit him or roll a mile away, and I'd say, "I'll go get it," and he's, "No, I'll get it." And all these things, I looked back,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how to put it all in words, but like when my two boys were growing up, I'd say, "No, you go get it. You're gonna throw that hard." I'd like, come on, like, wind it down, And of course, I never wound it down, my dad. But I look back at that. He went after the ball. He went and fixed the window and never yelled at me.
I mean, it's interesting to hear
Set
that.
by example, almost.
Yeah, it's very interesting to
And
hear
that I
that.
think that you and I talked 1,000 times on this. I think that comes from way back in his life,
Oh yeah.
and probably way back in their life, and it gets all passed down. So that whole mental thing, it's kind of an unwritten, subconscious thing. The way you are, the way you behave, is the way you were brought up.
Oh yeah.
And how far does this go down? Like me to my two boys, and then to you and Dexter and Chloe, and it just gets passed down and down. So
Well, it makes me think whenever you say, like, you tell a story like that, and I think about my dad, Brian, and it's the same thing. Like, I remember being like 18, 19, maybe early 20s, and kind of being like, almost like questioning, like, why didn't he yell at me more? Like, there's plenty of reasons. My mom yelled at me all the time. Me and her would get in yelling matches, but he never yelled at me.
the way she was brought up.
Yeah, and I kind of I might have taken advantage of that a little bit. Him not getting pissed off at me. I mean, not that he never ever did, but it was very unlikely. But then once I was like really starting to understand life, I'd really look back at stuff, and I'd be like, all those times, like, he sacrificed, and he didn't really have to do that. And if it was any other, parent, they would have been, hey, like, kid, piss off. Like, I ain't bringing you here doing this, or, driving to a hockey game way out, whoever knows where, or, it's all these, like, lead by example type things. And, like, I remember even just, like, work. And I've worked with many different people, and I've seen people bring their kids to work, or they're younger, 16, 17-year-olds, and they're hard on them. And Dad was never hard on us. If we wanted to sit down, we would sit down. And yes, to an extent, like, I would say, like, yeah, you got to motivate your kids and teach them how to work hard, but like, he never complained, and he always, like, picked up and gave, like, his full effort. And as far as working goes, it would make me feel bad. I'd feel bad because I'm like, I'm sitting down and he's still, busting ass. when you're a kid, you don't really realize that, but then when you're older, that really comes into play, and you're like, man, like I really gotta try, if you're a halfway decent person. But anyways, it's interesting that you say
And the
that.
beat, the beat goes on.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that about your dad, and then obviously you did that for,
Yeah.
my dad and Jesse, and then now same for me, and then hopefully same for my kids.
It's like the unspoken thing. Like you can discipline somebody by whipping them or, show by example and just, say, hey, let's go fix that wrong. We'll fix it together.
Well, I think a big part of that is relationship, having a relationship. So if you just beat your kid and walk off, it's never going to fix anything.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier for you to build a relationship with a kid if you bring them and say, hey, this is what needs to be done. Or even if, like, every once in a while, the kid probably needs a smack or something, but you explain to them, like, hey, this is why I did this. And so at least you have that relationship back and forth. But anyways, what about, so you said you had a good relationship with your father, and what did he do for work? Where did he work
He
at?
was, he worked at a creamery in my hometown for 35 years. Before that,
Pull that a little bit closer.
he worked on the railroad during the Depression. After the Depression cleared out, he got the job at the creamery for 35 years. That's where he retired from. And when he got the job on the railroad, I think at that point, of course, it was the Depression, and all you could do to go out and hunt and fish and berry pick and keep your family with food. And
How old was he around the Depression time?
well, he was born in 1908.
So 1930, he would have been late 20s or something.
Yeah,
So right about my age.
Yeah. And it's funny because that number 1908, I see that everywhere. I see it on license plates. I see it on TV. I see it hundreds and hundreds of times. Even in the last 6 months, I've seen that number. And I'm thinking, man, do I go play that number in the lottery? Is that the 8th minute of the 19th hour that I'm going to end my life on Earth? Is it going to be the number just keeps reappearing? And now I'm looking for it. Maybe that's because I'm looking for it.
Yeah.
And if you look at try to recall any number, you probably could, your calendar, 22. But the story of him during the Depression was they had a little railroad line running from one little town to the next, and they needed to put a connector line in for grain. And back then, the kids would go to school on the railroad. You didn't get a bus, or you didn't usually walk. It was too far because they had one-room schoolhouses. Like you could be 10 miles away.
So they would ride the railroad to school?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep. And I think it was pretty much free, maybe for the little kids to go to school. And these weren't big, giant railroads. You're little connector jobbers, So his line was, they're going to call it the peanut line because it was just a smaller version of the rail size. So they had during the Depression, they had a job thing. So they had all these men come line up. And my dad said, well, I know darn well I'm going to be throwing a pickaxe and shoveling cinders and coal and driving spikes and all that, and I don't want to do that. So he said the first thing was, who can cook? So he said, I raised my hand up. And he said, I was the first one. I stepped forward and raised my hand up, just like I want to be the first one. And my wife said to him, well, why did you do that? Because I knew that if I didn't cook, I'd be hard labor. And, I'm not dumb, he says. I don't want to do hard labor, If I had to, I would have. But, and my wife says, well, how many people did you have to cook for? He's like 60 or something. She says, how do you know the recipe for 60? He says, well, we used to go hunting all the time, coon hunting and rabbit and squirrel and, corn and blah, blah, blah. You just, your recipe times 60. That's all I did. he said everybody was happy, you know.
Uh-huh.
So, anyways,
through.
that kind of quick synopsis on him.
Yeah, and then worked at a creamery most of his whole life, pretty
Yeah,
much.
Yeah, retired out of there.
And then, so what about your mom? What was she like?
She went to Geneseo, New York, had a teacher's college, they called it. Back then, the teacher's college they called normal. So it was Geneseo Normal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what normal meant. Probably not what you and I think normal would be. But so she went to teacher's college. I don't know how long, a year, 2 years, I don't know.
Mm.
So she got a job teaching a one-room schoolhouse. First thing she did was went out and bought her brand new car. Just like you and I would do today, you know.
Yeah.
That we'd go out and buy a, you know,
Knew some.
$80,000 pickup that's worth $30,000 next week. And but she went out and bought a brand new Model A Ford. The typical look back at the oldest car you could ever find, just about, and there it is.
Yeah.
And so she had that, and my dad and my mother, they probably met at a dance because everybody danced back then on the weekends. And I do have a couple of old pictures of her in her classroom. And she had older kids and little kids. I said, well, how come all the kids are so age different? She said, well, back then a one-room schoolhouse was a one room, so you'd have kids from kindergarten to 12th grade.
Mm.
Even though most kids got to be 14 or whatever, they quit because they had to go work. You know, it wasn't, high school education wasn't a big thing back then.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't matter.
You pretty much learned how to read, a little bit of writing, a little
Yeah.
bit of math.
Yeah, how to count your money. So she says a lot of the kids that did stick around were very helpful because I would tell them that they had part of their learning experience. They had to teach the young kids because I had a hard time teaching kindergarten through 12.
How many students in the one room?
Oh, I probably varied, but the picture I have, there's probably 10 or 12 or.
So like 10 or 12 a day.
Yeah.
Oh. And then would it fluctuate too? Like
I don't know.
maybe.
I have no idea.
So she did that. Did she do that for many years?
I think she did that for, I want to say 8 or 10 years probably.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe until my older brother was born.
All right. So
I don't know.
was she? What was she like? Did you have a good relationship with her too?
Oh yeah, she was.
I know she was a Yankees fan.
Oh yeah, she and I watched the Yankees every Saturday. One story I have. She'd always sit at the dining room table playing solitaire, but her eyes are on the TV. So we're watching the Yankees, and I'm in there sitting in a chair watching the Yankees. My dad would work Saturdays. Of course, the games are always on Saturday. They're always televised at 2 o'clock in the afternoon again. So he'd get home from working at the creamery at noon, have a quick lunch, go out, mow the lawn, do something like that. He never made me mow the lawn or do anything. I don't know. My wife says, you didn't have chores? I said, no. Didn't have to do anything. Just go play baseball and get as good as you can, just about. And so she's sitting at the dining room table. My dad comes in. He might have poured a beer or something like that from working outside after work on Saturday. And he's sitting in a chair watching the game, and I'm in the other chair watching the game, and she's in the dining room table watching the game, playing cards. And she says, just watch your dad. Watch his hands go up onto his chest. As soon as he does that, his head goes snapping back and his mouth is open and he's snoring. I can't understand it. It makes me so sick of that. Of course, she wanted to go somewhere.
Yeah, she wanted to go out. Here, put a pause on that. I got to go let the dog out real quick. Be right back. Feeling okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Dad would fall asleep in the chair on Saturday after work.
Yeah, and my mother would again say, "Look at him. Just his hands are gonna go up to his chest. His head will snap back. His mouth will pop open, and he'll start snoring." So I'd sit there and watch and watch. Sure enough, just like clockwork, he couldn't stay awake, you know. And she would say, "Look at him, just wasting his life away in there. Look at him, wasting his life away." And of course, there's a motive in there because she wanted to go downtown to the pub
Mm-hmm.
and meet some people that she knows and have a good time, and then they might have a snack down there. Gab, yeah, that's what they did. And it's funny back then because we called them beer joints, but now they're called pubs or whatever. But people would go down there to do that, like they do in England, say, for example. Oh, that's cool, going to the pub, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of cool. Now you think in America, oh, you're going down to the beer joint or
To the bar.
get hammered, you know, and
Yeah.
come out and get in an accident. So it's a negative
Yeah.
thing. Where in the a few years ago, it was like, oh, that's how you socialize,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So, anyway, my dad's sleeping away, and all of a sudden, about an hour later, and my mother knew this would happen. That's why she wanted it to happen sooner. She would be watching, and all of a sudden he would snap up, sit up straight, clap his hands. Of course, my mother's name was Mabel. He called her May. He'd snap right up like out of a deep sleep and clap his hand like, "Come on, May, get your dress on. We're going down to Sam's." That's the bar, you know. So I thought you would never ask. So she's like, hurry up upstairs, you know, and he had her night wardrobe on, or I don't know, and come down dressed, you know, and fancy shoes. And,
What time about would they go?
oh God, that was
it
probably
be nighttime or would it be dinner time?
4 o'clock in the afternoon,
Yeah.
maybe.
So what was their relationship like? Were they pretty close? Did they argue? Never really argue, or
No,
they get along good?
Yeah.
Was that kind of a normal thing? And people didn't really.
I have no idea.
Yeah, you probably.
I was young enough; everything was perfect back then.
Yeah, that's good.
You know.
So what about your brothers? What were they like? You had two.
Okay, my brother Bob, he was 12 years old, and my brother Jerry's 10 years older. My brother Bob was an outstanding athlete in school. I never saw him play, but my other brother said he was one of the best in Western New York.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the first to come up with a jump shot. Where he ever got the jump shot, whether he saw somebody, because you didn't have games on TV and stuff now where the kids copy moves.
Yeah.
So I said, "Really, a jump shot?" He said, "Yep." And he said, back then it was like unstoppable. Yeah, so he was like in his junior year in high school, and he wasn't feeling good. He got the mumps, and the doctor came to the house because back then the doctor do house calls.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was probably at that point, oh God, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 4, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the doctor coming, walking up the stairs to our upstairs, and I remember asking my mother and dad, "How come Dr. Yanowich is here?" "Well, Bob's awful sick. We can't bring him down to the doctor," so they come in to see him. And next thing I know, they're bringing him down on a stretcher. And I was kind of sick at the time, and they said that he had polio. Of course, this is back in the 51, 2 or 3, I don't know, the big polio thing that went all around the country.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was getting polio. So he got polio. He had polio, and they took him away. And he went to, in the city of Rochester, he went to a hospital called Strong Memorial Hospital. His room was B3. I remember it. I remember the room B3. But I was young enough, they wouldn't let me upstairs, so they would keep me down in like the lobby, like almost like a library, like walls of books. And dark wood paneling and beautiful giant room. They'd wheel him out to the balcony, and I'd wave to him, he'd wave to me, and then they'd wheel him back in his room.
Yeah.
And I was never able to see him when he was in the hospital. So he spent like, I think, 6 months in the hospital. And at that point, they knew the disease was progressive and they could do nothing. They just watched the progression.
Mm-hmm.
And they had him in an iron lung for a while
Yeah.
because they didn't know whether it would affect his diaphragm.
Mm-hmm.
And because he was crippled from the waist down, they didn't know whether it progressed up or not. So he was in an iron lung for a while, and he said, "Boys, I was scared crapless in that thing." He said, "It's like you're gonna die. You know, the thing's gonna squeeze you to death or something." But they had to do it in case his diaphragm would stop working.
Yeah.
Well, you'd suffocate. So it eventually leveled out. I don't know how long. I have no idea how long it took. But they sent him then to a rehabilitation center down in the Hudson, New York State,
And
called Haverstraw.
And he was paralyzed from the waist down.
Yes. And there he was, one of the best athletes the area had ever seen.
And taken away.
17 years old, crippled.
Wow.
And he had great stories down there. He says we were down there, and of course, a lot of the people in his wing were the same age,
Mm-hmm.
and all guys. And of course, he says a beautiful nurse would come by, and there we are, all 17-year-olds, and can't do anything. We'd all flirt with the nurses, and a lot of times at midnight, we would get in our wheelchairs and we'd take off. We'd go down and hide in the boiler room and all that, just to create all kinds of havoc. Then the alarm would go off, and then we were missing like 10 patients. They didn't know what happened. They finally find us, and he said, "We didn't care. What are they going to do?
Yeah.
Kick us out? No. They got to take our food away? No. Got to beat us? No." So it got to be so comical. They just didn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And he says one story was they'd have to build their arm strength up because they have to walk on crutches the rest of their life. So they were outside in the archery field, and they had the archery to build up their shoulders and arms. So he said, we're shooting at the targets and all that, and then all of a sudden we all decided to aim the arrows straight up in the air and at the same time and let them go. And these were like metal-tipped arrows. These weren't like suction cups. So he said it was like an English movie. He said all of a sudden these arrows starts coming down, boing, boing, sticking in the ground. Nurses running everywhere, and we had our hands over our heads and thinking that's going to protect us. But he said you get to a point where it's not that you don't care, but you're like, how bad can it get now?
Yeah.
You didn't want to die, but he said
There's a modern day word for that us kids use. It's a little unfamily friendly, but it's no fucks given anymore. That's what we use.
Yeah. So he spent the rest of his life crippled from the waist down. He ended up getting a job for the County of Monroe in the city. Actually, what started when he got the disease, the Ford dealer in town, who was a World War II veteran pilot, bomber pilot, really nice guy. He told my brother, do whatever you got to do, and when you get out of the hospital, you come to me, I'm going to give you a job.
That's awesome. That'd be the hardest part, is finding employment after something like that.
Yeah,
if you're 17 years old and
Yep.
it's not like you had previous skills doing
Yeah.
something else other than
Yeah.
being a kid.
Yeah, being a basketball player. But he got out, he went down to the Ford garage, and he got him into bookkeeping, showed him how to keep all the books and all that. Because you're an employee of the garage of a Ford dealer, you could get a new car every year. It's called the demonstrator plan.
Mm-hmm.
You get a brand new car every year, and you only pay like a third of what the payment would be.
Wow.
And you drive the car till it gets like 10,000 miles on it or something. I can't remember. Very low mileage. Then you had to give it up. But he had to sell it. he had to almost be like the salesman. So people coming in, and the salesman might say, well, we got these cars out in the lot, and the new ones are here, but we have a couple demonstrator, which now you advertise them as low mileage used cars.
Yeah.
So they would meet with my brother and deal with him. Of course, he's employee of the garage, so they'd come up with a agreeable price, and the dealer trusted him.
Mm-hmm.
So the dealership would sell the car my brother drove, and then he would get another brand new car. So you always had brand new cars, all Fords, And I got my license, waiting for my license in the mail to come, and he said, whenever that comes, you call me up and I'll come get you at noontime, and you bring me back to work, and you take my car for the day. And so I remember the day my license came, that happened, and I called him, he came and got me, and I took him back to work and went and picked up my girlfriend, who is now my wife. And we drove her all around the Finger Lakes, and what a freedom that was, like unbelievable.
How
Just-
old were you when you got your license? Were you 16 or was it like
You
17?
could, in New York at that point, you get your permit when you're 16. You could not, you had to have a licensed driver with you at all times. I think you could drive at night, because I remember driving at night. You could get your license at 17 if you took driver's training in school.
Mm. So did you take driver's
And they had
training?
driver's training in school, and they offered that for free.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a free period. The shop teacher would be the driving training instructor.
Hmm.
He was a cool guy, because he was a former hockey player, and a really good hockey player. And he would take us like a couple towns over and go into into like a package store, they call them now, and buy us all ice cream. We'd all get in the car and head back to town about 6 or 8 miles away, eating our ice cream cones. And he was a super guy.
That's cool. So what about what was Bob?
And
Like,
I like all the I like all these people that I forget about, but telling the story, they pop, and I'm thinking there were so many nice people.
yeah, that all played a small pivotal
Yeah.
little role.
And I don't know how much they involved in my cortex, but it's like my wife always says, you had a perfect childhood. And I'm thinking, well, what do you mean a perfect? And then her childhood was good, but there was a few things that went on that did not go on in my family. At least I never knew about it. And so I think, she said, maybe I did have a perfect childhood.
That's
You
how
know.
I feel.
Everything was given to you, but not, given to you. It was,
Everything was like the perfect. It seemed like the perfect mix
yeah,
of responsibility and care, love,
Yeah.
plus also
Yeah.
discipline and. Right. I want to talk about Jerry, but give me one. I'm gonna grab Piper real quick.
who is that?
Look who just got up.
Hey. Hi. Hi, Piper. Hi. You good girl? Yeah.
Put her on this side. You're on camera with all of us. So that was your brother Bob. That was your oldest brother.
Yeah, 12 years older.
And what was real quick before we go to Jerry, what was your relationship like with Bob? Because you guys spent a lot of time together later on in life too, right?
Yeah, growing up, Jerry went to the Army, Well, Jerry's always off of college, so I missed him for 4 years there. Then he went right into the military.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time that happened, and he came back home, he worked at a bank in the city of Rochester. I was, I think, in high school. So I lost a lot of formative years that Bob was always there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. Bob and I got real close.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you don't know it back then, but like you and Dexter, you're brothers.
Yeah.
You're expected to be close. You are close. But until you're like, get to be older
Mm-hmm.
and you've all done your own thing and all that, then you're going to realize how close you really were.
And how much effort it takes too, because it does take
Yeah.
effort.
Yeah, yeah. But, like, Bob was, even though he was crippled from the waist down, like, he was so athletic that when he got home from work, everybody worked Saturday mornings back then. Of course, he worked at the garage as a bookkeeper.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd come home and he would park his car in the middle of my parents' lawn because he still lived at home. And he would say, get the hose out for me and bucket and water and all that stuff. I'd go to wash the car. Loved washing his car. There he is, crippled from the waist down. So I said, let me do it for you. No, well, let me at least hose it down. No. So he'd get up on his crutches and his braces and lean against the car. He had old clothes on. And he'd hose the car down. He'd get soaking wet. I think he loved being wet.
Mm-hmm.
Must be. And then he'd grab the soap and the sponge and he would swing his way around the car in his crutches, do the roof, wash it off. White wall tire cleaner, of course. Back then, the white walls are like 3 inches wide, and boy, they were white. And
What kind of car do you remember at that point in time?
oh God, he had one point he had a '58 Cadillac convertible gray. I think a white top and red burgundy interior. Boy, that's a beautiful car. He had, of course, he had the Fords there. I think he had the Cadillac was brought in on a trade. He took that instead of getting another brand new car.
Mm.
And then he had that a while. And then he got another brand new Ford. He was dating his wife Dorothy, and she loves Chevrolets. So when they got married, they always had Chevrolets, brand new ones, really nice. But he would get the car all cleaned off, and then he'd go pick up Dorothy at her folks' house. Of course, this is after high school, after the rehabilitation center, after training at the Ford garage. So he was probably 20, 21,
Mm-hmm.
full of piss and vinegar. And so he'd go pick up Dorothy, and then they'd come back and pick me up. And the three of us would take off. We'd go on big rides every Saturday afternoon. Of course, he had to have the car clean, vacuumed, don't touch the windows, nothing. Just couldn't go in a dirty car.
Yeah.
And he said it always ran better when it was clean. I always remember that. And
I'll have to remember that.
you ever do that? You wash your car and you take off, and
Yeah.
just mentally you think your car's running better, and
Yeah.
maybe it's the moisture got into the.
I don't know. Yeah, I know what you mean.
And boy, are you changing every time I see you. But our rides would involve going from Finger Lakes area, north of there where we lived, down in the Finger Lakes, up and down every lake, the lake road, then up on top, another road, up and down, north and south, next lake over, stop, get an ice cream cone, down into the Pennsylvania border, back home. We get back home and it'd be like, we'd already stopped for a hot dog for dinner, like
Mhm.
at 5:30 or 6 somewhere. So we'd come back home, we'd stop at the package store, and he'd give me money. So here, go and buy a bunch of fudgesicles, popsicles, Nutty Buddies, everything. Just whatever you want, just buy a bunch of stuff. Because we're going to eat it too. So we get back home, and he would sit in the middle of the living room in his wheelchair, Dorothy on his lap, I'm over in another chair and we're watching movies or something. I don't know. And of course, I went to bed after about 85 ice creams. And I don't, who knows what they did? None of my business. But next Saturday, same old thing. There we go again. And that was the summer, how the summers were when I was being brought up.
Hmm.
And you go back a few years. I don't know whether he was home from the hospital or when he was still in high school. Must have been when he was still in high school. But every Saturday morning, a farmer girl up the road would come on a horse. Her parents owned a farm and they had horses and cows, and so she had riding horses. So she would always come down on a Saturday morning, tie her horse up on a tree out by our sidewalk, go in the house and get me, and I'd come and she'd throw me up on the horse and we'd go horseback riding. She and her girlfriend and me. And I always wondered, I said to my dad once, why does Joanne Halley come always pick me up on a Saturday? Because she's trying to get Bob, my brother Bob. This before he was crippled, you know. Of course, I don't know whether he was dating Dorothy at the time or I don't know. But they knew each other from high school, Bob and Dorothy. That was kind of a funny story, but I still remember getting on the horses and clickety-clock down the road. And
funny thing. So I've been kind of getting not irritated at myself, but just I've been so busy with things and doing so much, and I have a lot of things and responsibilities and work and school, and Mackenzie with work and school and all that. And like one thing I've always loved during the summertime is like going swimming, you know, going to the pool or going to a lake or whatever.
Mhm.
And I think in the past like 3 years I've been swimming 3 times.
Yep.
You know, a handful of times. And I'm like, that's through the summer, everything. I'm like, that is, and swimming's not even my most favorite thing to do, but it's just something everybody does in the summer. And I love doing it growing up and everything.
You know what all that's called?
What?
Life.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. But I haven't been able to do anything.
You have priorities now.
Yeah. But I'm like, I can't keep doing this to myself. I can't, because every single summer I'm like, okay, this summer I'm going to have fun.
Yep.
And I end up just working and working and working. And so I told Mackenzie, I said, I'm not doing this no more. We're at a bare minimum, we're going to pick one fun thing per month to go out and do. And one of my things that I picked was going horseback riding. I want to go horseback riding. I don't know why. I just picked it because I want to go do it. But so talk about Jerry for a little bit, and then we'll stop it because we've already been going for an hour.
Okay, Jerry. As I was growing up, we lived on a creek. These things are all flashbacks. We lived on a creek, kind of a big creek in the back. We were up on a stone wall, the back of our patio, and he would always come grab me and take me over to the edge of the creek and throw me like he's going to throw me in like a bag of trash and scare the crap out of me. And I knew that he would never let go, but I just knew it, but I hated it. So when I heard him running out the back door, I knew he was going to come get me. And just like.
Did they have a nickname for you?
Mitch.
They called you Mitch?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Where it came from, I don't know. Everybody back then had nicknames.
Yeah.
My brother Bob was Rock, because he always threw rocks at everybody when he was younger, I guess. Jerry's was, I can't remember. But anyways, one day, so I'd always hated my brother for doing that, even though I loved my brothers. And one day I did fall in, and I fell off the side of the wall into the creek, and I didn't hit any stones in a critical area. And it wasn't deep. It was probably not even knee deep. It was summertime.
Yeah.
So he comes running out of the house. Evidently he's watching me or something. He comes running out of the house, jumps off the wall, and jumps right in
Jeez.
Rather than walk down the edge of the wall where our little staircase was, he jumped right in and, you all right? You all right? And I'm thinking, wow, here comes this guy that fakes throwing me in every other day. And to do that, like, man, it just, it's one of those, you always remember that
Yeah.
for some reason that, geez, he does care.
Yeah, he has your back.
And we had a big lawn across the street where our neighbors lived. We always play ball over there. One day, the ball went rolling into the road. Cars go whipping by, and I'm on a dead run trying to go get the ball, like deep center field. And then what gets by you, so you chase the ball.
Oh.
And I was going to get near the road and stop. I knew enough not to get in the road. And next thing you know, I'm tackled from behind hard. And it was Jerry. Evidently, he was on a dead run. He saw me running toward the road. He thought I was going to run in front of a car. So he tackled me hard. Boy, it jarred me. Like, what hit me? He said, I wasn't sure whether you're going to stop or not. I said, I was going to stop. No, he says, I didn't know. So those two things, like, geez. But he was, when I was growing up, he was always at college. Then he went to the Army and blah, blah. And Bob and I kind of had a thing,
Tell
you know.
tell the story about how they picked your middle name.
Oh, when I was born, of course, they were 10 and 12 years older. And back then, cowboys were big,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Roy Rogers and all that stuff. So they named me after my uncle, Marshall. And they wanted to, my brothers wanted to name me. And my parents said, no, you're not going to name him, because they probably knew they'd be something screwy. So, okay, you can name his middle name. So they said, okay, Roy, for Roy Rogers, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, he's not going to be Roy. So, all right, Gene, for Gene Autry, who was another cowboy at the time. So they said, okay, so that was Gene, and of course that got to be my middle name
Yeah. So Marshall Gene.
because
I like
of the
that.
cowboy. My brothers named me. So,
So we're just past we just got through kind of your family history.
yeah.
And so what I would like to do is I just have a quick few questions for you.
Yep.
What I really want to do is do like a part 2, and then I want to talk about your life growing up, Nana, Brian and Jesse, and then, you know, us and where we're kind of up to present day. Hopefully on a day when when Mackenzie is here, so then she can watch the baby. But I just don't want her to get super hungry and start wailing, and then I got to go off and feed her and put a pause and a stop to everything.
Okay.
But I definitely want to do a part 2 if you're okay with that.
Anytime.
Okay, and I'll try to make it by like next weekend
Yeah.
or something.
Do it later today if you want. Well,
Yeah, we can do it probably later today too.
I'm doing nothing all weekend.
Whenever we have some more free time. So some of the things that I wanted to ask you, especially coming, you know, since we talked about your history and we talked a little bit about those people that come in and out of your lives that teach you certain things. One thing that we've been talking about with like our men's group and different stuff like that is like what it is to be, you know, a man. And
Yep.
from your generation or what you kind of see, and you've probably never even had to put it into words, but what do you think is a man? What is that? If you had to describe what a man is, or what a good man is. If you had to say that, how would you describe
Well,
that person?
I think it all starts with naturally your upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
People that had a really good upbringing, not a lot of trauma, not a lot of stuff to deal with. When they grew up, they were a kid and they were allowed to be a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and almost like you're naive to stuff that's happening in the world. Of course, when I grew up, you know, didn't have all the conveniences you do now,
Mm-hmm.
so we didn't know what was going on beyond the neighborhood.
Yeah.
We didn't need to know,
Yeah.
and I think it made us healthier because of it.
Yeah. Sometimes there's too much information.
And you bond with people better. You have relationships that last a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Might have been a neighbor kid that you don't have much in common with, but because he's in the neighborhood,
You'd be better off playing with him than with nobody.
yeah, and you knew enough not to hurt his feelings or.
Mm-hmm.
you
Where
just-
did all that? Do you think all that kind of came from your upbringing,
Definitely.
what your parents taught you?
That's
and-
why I think I think the way you're brought up is the way you're going to be. And if you brought up, and there's a few negatives popping in there, and if you can fight those off and basically live a life of keep pushing them back, pushing them back. Don't push them out back so far you're going to have anxiety attacks.
Yeah.
But understand that this happened, that happened, and this wasn't the way you treat a family, or like I don't want to treat people that way, and you like break the chain.
Yeah.
You got to break the chain. Otherwise, like we know a lot of people, you and I know a lot of people that things have happened in their life, and it seems to be normal, and they're destined to repeat it.
Yeah.
And their kids repeat it. Now, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to oversimplify it, but I just think and it's harder and harder the more that's happened to you to suppress it.
Yeah. One thing like that for me is growing up, I was always the oldest of everything. So then all my uncles and older cousins and stuff, they were like kind of the older siblings to me, because I really didn't have any older siblings. And everyone always treated the younger one kind of like trash, or even though they would jump in the river for him, or if push came to shove, they would defend him tooth and nail. But that never came to be. That was never shown. So it was always just the picking on, and all this and that, and hey, you suck, whatever. And I remember being like 17. I think it was like right around 17 or 18, probably 17, and I was never great to Dexter. I was never like nice to him or like cared about him. And
that's typical older brother, younger brother.
Yeah. And
how many years apart?
5 years. So it's just enough to where he's younger, but it's not enough to where like Bob was 12 years old, so he'd kind of went through all the dumb growing up stuff and was at a point where he could kind of like take you under his wing type thing.
Yep.
But for me and Dexter, I remember he was still doing stuff that like I had just quit doing, playing video games. And I'm like, I'm done with that. I don't do that anymore. That's not cool for a 17-year-old kid. I'd go around and drive my car. That's what I do, So I remember one day I saw him sitting there playing a game or something, and I thought, I remember this day, I thought it was the dumbest, it's what kids do. It's like watching a kid's TV show. It's like, that is so stupid. Well, I remember, I don't know what I was doing. I was going to do something. I might even have been like leaving the house. And I remember I was turning to go walk upstairs and leave. And I looked at him, and he was just quiet, playing by himself. And I remember I walked over and I sat down with him on the floor. And I was like, hey, explain me this game. And his eyes like just lit up. And I'm like, well, what do you do? So he's showing me everything, and I'm watching. And sure enough, a couple hours go by. And I'm like, man, that actually looks pretty cool. And so I'm like, oh, hey, yeah, I have to leave. I was going to do something, going to hang out or whatever. I'm like, I have to leave. But I'm like, yeah, I should go and get that game, and I can play it with you. And I came back home later on that day or something, and he comes up to me. And I never did anything for him. And he never did anything for me. Like going out of your way type thing, And I came back, and he's like, hey, I downloaded that game on your Xbox for you. I'm like, how did you buy it? He goes, I didn't buy it. I'm like, well, how'd you get it? And he just like smiled. And still to this day, I don't think he really remembers how he did it, but he somehow downloaded it onto like a flash drive and went and put it into my Xbox and installed it or something. And then so there was multiple weekends after that where me and him and all of our friends all played this game, all night long. And just 2-3 weeks prior, I was like, you're such an idiot for playing that. You're so stupid. But because I sat down, and then little did I know, it was just building relationship with him, at that point in time. And then after that, me and him we've always been super close then.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, it was that breaking of the tradition of, hey, piss off, you're my little brother, I don't care about you. And then if I wouldn't have done that, you know, we wouldn't be as close as we are today. Now I don't think there's anyone I trust more.
Mhm.
So that's really good. And that's kind of a cool place to end it. We're an hour and 15 minutes in
Mhm.
already. So when we get back, we'll schedule some more time because I want to take a while on all your interests, and I want to talk a lot about baseball, and we're going to talk a lot about Nana and what you guys did and what life was like and when you're younger, and I want to talk a lot about what my dad and Jesse were like 'cause we know they were crazy, and then
No, they weren't. They're just normal.
they were boys. But so that's that. That was how do you think that went? Did you enjoy it?
Great. Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Different. Okay.
Seems like we're here 10 minutes.
All right.
Yeah.
So
But,
boom.
That it?